Last week, I told you that I was going to be talking about autism and how it relates to me and different things like that. So today, I am going to start off with an introduction video for the series that I'm going to be making. My series is going to be called Autism and Me, and this first video is going to be how does autism affect me personally. Now, I won't go into a lot of detail on each one of them because I'm actually going to be making videos on most of the areas that I talk about. So you will have a chance for me to get a little bit deeper and explain a little bit more about each of those specific areas. When I asked my girlfriend Katie what the most noticeable area was, she, without missing a beat, said executive functioning and time management. Now, for those of you who don't quite know what executive functioning is, it's basically the tasks that you choose to do and the order in which you do the steps to complete those tasks. For me, I have a great deal of difficulty in terms of executive functioning because I can get stuck knowing which step I need to take next in order to complete a task. Especially if I'm given more than one task at a time, I can get a little bit confused and get my steps mixed up and do things out of order and be really inefficient because of that. And that kind of leads into the time management thing, because if I have issues with my steps of completing a task, then sometimes I can get kind of caught up on one particular step and spend a lot of time on that and then not really have enough time to accomplish the other things I need to do, and that kind of leads me to being late for a lot of things. The next thing I want to talk about is social cue recognition. Now, there's a few things within that kind of bubble that I want to hit. The first is body language. I have a lot of difficulty understanding body language. It's not that I don't see it or don't notice it, it's that the way that people understand it naturally does not come naturally to me. There may be situations where a neurotypical person would pick up on body language very easily, but I would just be like, no idea. Something that kind of goes along with that is I have trouble knowing whether or not someone is interested in having a conversation. It's a little bit easier in person because I can get some of those facial cues, and while body language is difficult, it's not completely impossible for me because I have learned to kind of process it over time. But online it can be very difficult because I might not realize that a person isn't interested in talking at the moment, and then I'll keep talking, and it can be kind of a difficult situation for them and for me because I didn't intend to kind of overstep my boundaries. And that kind of leads to the last thing within social cue recognition, and that is boundaries and relationships. Growing up in my teen years, I kind of had a lot of difficulty understanding like where my boundaries were, especially with girls, and that led to kind of some difficult situations where girls got the wrong signals and thought that I was really romantically interested in them, but in reality I had no idea and I just thought we were good friends. I'm 24 now, so I've had a little bit of time to kind of learn where these lines are and kind of how to set those boundaries, but it definitely was very, very difficult throughout my teen years trying to know, okay, have I overstepped my friendship? Have I been too nice? Am I allowed to say this? But yeah, just boundaries and relationships. That was and is just a really abstracted foreign thing to me. Not because I don't care, it's just like I said, it doesn't come naturally to me. The next thing I want to talk about is language. And there's kind of two specific things I want to hit within that little bubble. The first is sarcasm and innuendos. Now, this is pretty common knowledge about people with autism that they don't really get sarcasm. But see, the thing about it is that I get sarcasm, but because my brain is so rational in most situations, I don't usually understand how to respond to sarcasm. That also applies to innuendos as well. Most of the time I get them, I just don't really understand how to respond to those. And then the other way that kind of plays out is it's also difficult for me to understand when it's appropriate to be sarcastic or say innuendos. Again, not because I don't think about it, it's because I have that trouble processing the sarcasm and innuendos. I in turn don't really know exactly where to use them. There have been situations where I've been having a conversation with my girlfriend and I say something sarcastic that ends up being slightly hurtful or inappropriate in the conversation, and I don't realize that, and she calls me out on it, and I am like, oh, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. So that's something that kind of happens not daily, but pretty regularly in my life. The second thing that's kind of similar to that is abstract concepts, kind of like metaphors. Those can be really tricky for me because, like I said earlier, I'm a pretty rational thinker. A good example of this is actually that video that guy made about the party pooper, and he was like, why is she pooping at the party? That makes no sense. Obviously that's a satirical video, but it's actually pretty good illustration as to how my brain works and how a lot of people on the spectrum think. We can be very literal and very rational about metaphors if we aren't understanding kind of where they're coming from or what they actually mean. I remember when I was growing up, I would hear metaphors and I would do exactly what that guy did in the video and think like, what? That doesn't make any sense. What? Over time, I have gotten a lot better at understanding metaphors, and even using metaphors has been something that I can do, but there are many situations where I will hear a metaphor that I've never heard before, or I will just think about a metaphor and my brain just kind of deconstructs it and is like, that doesn't make any sense. The next area that I want to talk about is sensory processing. While there are many people on the autism spectrum who have great difficulty with sensory processing things, I do have some sensory processing things, but for the most part it is not debilitating, so I'm very fortunate in that regard. One of the biggest ways that it does affect me is textures specifically related to food. I absolutely cannot eat overcooked noodles or like soggy things or overly ripe fruit. I don't know why, it just is so uncomfortable and unpleasant in my mouth that I just cannot do it. I also have slightly heightened sensitivity to sounds, particularly music. If a sound or a song is unpleasant, it can physically be uncomfortable, and in some situations can actually cause me pain and discomfort and dysphoria and just be like, ugh. And while there have been many situations where it was extremely unpleasant, there have also been a lot of situations where it was to my advantage because I could really experience the music in a full way that normal people wouldn't generally experience. Like when I do hear really great music, it is just such an incredible experience because it's not just I hear it, it's that I feel it with my whole body. And then something that kind of goes along with sensitivity to sound is I have a lot of trouble with trying to focus on every conversation that's going on, and that is really difficult when there's a TV on because there's a lot of sounds and voices coming from a TV, and I just want to pay attention to that and know what is happening there, even if it's not even a show that I'm interested in. And this can be very difficult if someone is trying to talk to me and I start zoning out watching the TV. Not on purpose because I don't care about what they're saying, it's just because my brain's top priority is, oh, there is a sound and commotion happening over there. You need to pay attention to that because you don't want to miss out on what is happening there. You can't just listen to it, you need to physically look at it and know what is happening. I've certainly gotten a lot better, but there were a lot of times when I was younger where I would just completely zone out. Not even watching TV, it could have been a computer game or something, and I'm intensely paying attention to this particular thing, and my mom or my dad try to tell me something, ask me to do something, and I am just completely ignoring them. And from their perspective, it's I'm just being a rebellious kid that is completely ignoring them. But to me, I'm just I'm zoned in, man. So it can become very overwhelming if I'm kind of in a public space, especially at a convention like VidCon, and there's lots and lots of people talking. I'm constantly darting my head around, looking at people, trying to listen to conversations, and I've gotten a lot better, like I said, and I'm more aware of it, so I can consciously be no, I'm here with Katie, I need to pay attention to her, I need to pay attention to where we're going and what's happening with that, and not crash into people because there's people with their cameras walking around, and it can get a little complicated. But like I said, I have gotten a lot better, but it's still something that can be a challenge on a daily basis if I'm not really consciously focusing. The next little area I want to talk about is motor skills. For me, it means that movements that should be fluid are not fluid. For example, one time, probably about 10 years ago, I was in this basketball camp, and our teacher person was trying to teach us how to do a layup, and she explained each particular step and for the life of me, I could not do a layup. I understood all of these steps, but it was just not possible for me to connect them all into one fluid motion. And that kind of scenario happened again and again as I tried to do various sports growing up. It just became apparent that there were so many things I was not good at, not because I didn't have the talent for it, but because I couldn't physically do those fluid movements like other kids could. One of the things that I realized as I kind of looked back on this motor skills issue was that a really big part of that was me being hyper aware of my body. For most people, those steps kind of just come naturally. I am hyper aware of my body and I am kind of hyper aware of all those steps, and so I kind of get tripped up or slowed down by trying to process each one of those steps, because in my head, it's not a fluid movement. It's like, do this, and then this, and then this, and then this, in this particular time order, and then you will be able to do X movement. Obviously, not the most efficient way to do a layup. And the last area I want to hit is empathy. This is a big one. I actually have made a video about empathy, which I will put right up here on the screen. I'll also link it in the description below. I made that video a few years ago, so it might look a little bit different, but most of what I said is pretty much still true. I experience an overwhelming amount of empathy. In fact, I will go so far to say that I experience more empathy than your average neurotypical person. The problem is, while I do feel a lot and I empathize a lot, most of the time I don't really understand what it is that I'm feeling, and I have difficulty processing those things that are coming in. So I may be watching a movie and experiencing all these feelings and emotions that are happening in the story, and I can be incredibly overwhelmed and become anxious or upset, but I don't really understand why I'm feeling these things. I mean, I understand a lot more now as I'm older and I have learned to kind of recognize where these feelings are coming from. But when I was younger, I would get so overwhelmed and so frustrated because I could feel all these things, but they weren't my emotions and I didn't understand what was happening. And it was so easy to just kind of spiral because you don't understand where these feelings are coming from, but you're feeling them, and then you're upset, and then you're feeling these feelings on top of being upset, and it's just like, ah! The other thing in regards to empathy is that I can oftentimes have trouble reciprocating external emotions. What I mean by external emotions is emotions that other people are experiencing and share with me. For example, if someone came to me and was very excited about something that happened, it could be difficult for me to reciprocate that excitement. This is a perfectly human thing to do. We go to our friend and say, OMG, I got this particular thing, and that person's like, oh, that's so great, I'm so happy, yay! And that's kind of the normal exchange that you would expect. But for me, I have difficulty with that because my brain recognizes that that emotion is there, and it knows what kind of response that person is expecting, but then there's this disconnect because my brain is like, well, I get that I'm supposed to be excited, but that's not the emotion that I'm feeling right now. So then there's kind of this internal conflict of how do I reciprocate that emotion when I'm not feeling that emotion. I didn't understand this for a very, very long time, and that led to situations where I didn't really respond the way a person expected me to, and it kind of came off as me being, well, an asshole. But I'm not being an asshole. I just don't express things the same way that other people do. So it's not that I'm not excited for you, I'm just not experiencing the same emotion that you are, and that can make it challenging for me to reciprocate. If some of these things are things that you relate to, I would love to hear about it. Feel free to leave a comment below if you are on the spectrum, or even if you're a neurotypical person that experiences some of these things. I would love to hear your story and hear what you have to say about your perspective on autism. Like I said at the beginning, this video is the first of a series that I'm making called Autism and Me, where I discuss various areas of autism and how it affects me and what my perspective is on that area. I have at least 8 or 9 videos that I want to make, and probably more will come up as we progress. Please feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. There will be a link in the description to the playlist for all of the videos if you're watching this a little bit later on after I've already made a few, then you can just go to that link and you can see the playlist of the different videos for the different areas that I've talked about. Thank you so much for watching this video. A lot of the things that I talked about in this video were things that I've never really mentioned to other people before, so it was really great to be able to just share all these things with you. I'm really looking forward to continuing with this series, and I hope that you are too. That's all I have for today, so until next time, I hope you take care of yourself, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching. Bye!